What I do want to talk about next, though, is successful succession. What we see here is that Elijah had a very successful ministry, and he's passing the proverbial baton to his successor, Elisha. My wife, Grace, is here, and when we first met March 12th, 1988. And we were in high school, and she ran track. And I didn't know anything about track, but I liked Grace, so I had to figure out some things about track. And so what I learned was that Grace was a sprinter. She's fast, but I caught her. And she ran the 100, and then she ran the 4x100 relay. And if you're familiar with that race, they run around the track, and then they have to pass off the baton to the next runner. And so succession is literally the passing of the baton. That analogy is used. Well, I never ran track, but watching Grace, what I noticed was, number one, at some point you need to hand off the baton. Like if one person just ran all the way around the track, they're disqualified. You need to hand off the baton to the right person at the right time in the right place. And that transference is crucial, and many races are won or lost at the baton handoff. And what happens is that the runner who's carrying the baton, they'll slow down a little bit as they enter into that box of transition. And then the person who is going to carry the baton, they start to speed up. And all of this has to be synchronized so that the baton is not dropped. Leadership is like that. One generation runs their race, and then they need to pass the baton off to the next generation. That's what's happening here. And I want to talk a little bit about succession. Businesses, churches, ministries oftentimes struggle with succession. This is why you can drive around any major U.S. city, and there's a lot of buildings that are just dead. There was a day that they were running a race, and someone dropped the baton. There are certain denominations and networks that have gone woke and apostate. They handed the baton to the wrong person. There are places where the senior pastor should have retired 40 years ago. And at this point, he's still walking around the track with the baton. And somebody needs to come take it from him. And if you laugh, it's because you came from that church. Welcome, we're glad to have you. And so let me say this. The reason why I think it's good to talk about this is I'm not near that. I'm 52. I've been preaching for 30 years. I feel like I probably got 30 years left. So I'm somewhere around halftime, depending what I do with my diet. And so I like cheese, and that might shorten things. So let me talk a little bit about succession. And when it comes to succession, we see this with Elijah and Elisha. The key is to honor the founder and the future, okay? This word came to me some years ago, many years ago. I was at a conference in Europe. There was like 4,000 or 5,000 pastors. I was the guest. And as I was getting ready to speak, I felt like the Lord spoke to me and said, they need to start working on their succession plan and the handing off of the proverbial baton from the senior leader. And this is I won't say the name, this is a wonderful network of awesome, great, spirit-filled, Bible-believing, gracious, loving, joyful people. They're fantastic. And their founder is one of the greatest men. He is fantastic. And so I'm like, Lord, I'm the guest. I'm not the father. This isn't my house. This isn't my network. I mean, they think Americans are rude to begin with. And I'm a very rude American, I was like, Lord, I don't feel like this is my place to tell them what I think they need to do. So I went to the senior leader and I said, I feel like God's talking to me about talking to your people about succession. And I said, but you're the father. This is your house. You're the leader. And I love you. You're a good man. I don't want to overstep my bounds. I said, so I'm asking your permission. And if you say no, I honor spiritual authority, then I'm not going to preach this message that God just sort of gave me while I was sitting there. And he said, no, you can preach it. And he said, but after you're done, I'm going to get up and say whether or not I agree with it. I was like, just so you know, that'll never happen here. I will never, that's just too scary. I was like, okay, so I'm going to preach, and then we'll decide if you throw rocks at me. Okay, that sounds great. So I preached, and what I preached on was the word that God gave me, and that was that we need to honor the founder and the future. And the question is, well, if you had a godly leader in the past and God anointed them and did good things, how do you honor that? How do you honor the founder, but how do you have a future? And usually what happens in succession, they honor the founder or the future. Some churches, ministries, denominations, networks, it's like they're museums. Some businesses. Here's our founder, and here's what we used to do, and here's when we used to have plans and vision, and God showed up. It's like, well, that's great, but do we have any future? Other organizations, they just sort of dishonor, disrespect, disregard the founder. Like, we're going to move on, new vision, new leadership. No, what about the past and all the things that got done? And in a church or a ministry, this dishonors the older saints who gave and served faithfully to get us to that point of opportunity. And so I talked about honoring the founder and honoring the future. And they received that word, and God has been gracious. It's going great. But true or false, Elisha honors the founder and the future. He honors Elijah and everything that God has done and the future. Every church, every ministry is one generation away from the end of their work for the Lord. And so it's raising up the next generation and handing off the baton. Thanks for joining me. My name is Pastor Mark. I've been teaching the Bible for more than 3 decades and head-on constant collisions with woke culture. And I would love to get you more Bible teaching. 2 things you can do. Go ahead and watch the sermon in total and also subscribe to the channel. And I'll just keep sending you Bible teaching and we'll have a lot more fun together.